Morning. I'd like to call the December 10th Kankakee County Board meeting to order. Today's invocation is going to be done by Aaron Dunhill, who's going to fill in for Mr. Washington.
Lord, thank you for a new day. Thank you for bringing us together for the time to come and continue to work on either as we decision making today throughout.
Amen. And please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All righty, Mr. Hendrickson, if I could get a roll call, please.
Mr. Washington, Mr. Legess, Mr. Hess,
Present.
Mr. Tholen,
Present.
Mrs. Polk,
Present.
Mr. Snipes, Mr. Byrne,
Present.
Mr. Seroy,
Present.
Mr. Lear,
Present.
Mrs. Weber,
Present.
Mrs. Peters,
Present.
Mr. Payton,
Present.
Mrs. Parker,
Present.
Ms. Dunbar,
Present.
Mr. Kinzinger,
Present.
Mr. Fairfield,
Present.
Mr. Zenz,
Present.
Ms. Haas, Mr. Carrico,
Present.
Mr. Eckhoff,
Present.
Mr. Smith, Mr. Swanson, Ms. Zakulo,
Present.
Mr. Featherling,
Present.
Mr. Donnell,
Present.
Mr. Miller,
Present.
Mr. Long,
Present.
Mr. Wheeler.
Present. We have a quorum. I have no public comment today, no communications, presentations, or appointments. We have certificates of appreciation. 10 years, Karen Spatansky from the VAC. You here? All right, there she is. Also have Travis Carson from the Corrections Department, Dorothy Conklin from the Circuit Clerk's Office, and Jody Trudeau from the State's Attorney's Office. Ah, she's here. 25 years. Yes, yeah, word, speech.
Jody's like Chairman Wheeler said, Jody's been with us for 25 years. She keeps our office running. She does a lot of things. She always helps out when need be. She's an amazing paralegal. And many of you may have interaction with her because she's the paralegal in the civil division. So stop on by and say hi and congratulate her for her job well done for 25 years.
Yeah, let's do one more holding it up. Okay. All righty. Congratulations.
Thank you. All righty. Moving on, the minutes of the last meeting from November 12th. Need a motion to approve. Mr. Carrico, second. Mr. Byrne. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Under Claims Committee reports.
Mr. Chairman and members of the County Board, your Committee on County Claims would beg leave to report they have examined the following claims presented and recommend payment. The clerk is hereby authorized and directed to issue orders to the several claimants payable out of the funds as follows. Highway Fund, $795,983.63. All other funds, $2,506,633.13. Total for the month of October 2019. $3,302,616.76. The general fund, $1,481,482.63. All other funds, $5,083,977.01 for a total for the month of October 2019, $6,565,459.64.
Alrighty, so I need a motion to approve on that, on the Claims Committee reports. Say Mr. Tholen, second, Mr. Eckhoff. That'll be a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mr. Tholen.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Byrne.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Peters.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Dunbar.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Zenz.
Aye.
Mr. Carrico.
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Ms. Zakulo.
Aye.
Mr. Featherling.
Aye.
Mr. Donnell.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Long.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye, motion carries. For those who have been on the board a while, I don't know if you ever remember hearing those kind of numbers at this time of year. It's been a long time. Under department reports, you get those read in, please, sir.
County Collector's Monthly Report for October 2019. Total cash in bank and investments of $3,079,063.33. County Treasurer's Monthly Report for October 2019. Balance in bank of $3,078,900.38. Total cash and investments of $3,079,063.33. Coroner's Monthly Report for October 2019. Total calls 109, coroner's cases 22, autopsies 10, toxicology 11, outside autopsies 1, donations 2, indigents 1, x-rays 3, cremation 75, 3 incomplete. Income summary report for the coroner for October 2019, total of $3,911.37. Circuit Clerk Cash Book, total disbursed at the month end of October 2019, $392,852.62. Recorder's Monthly Report for October 2019, disbursement fees paid to the County Treasurer of $134,968.25. County Clerk's Monthly Report for October 2019, total fees of $28,563.37. The Monthly Building Division Report for October 2019, total permits of 98, fees of $28,024, total extra fees of $3,595 for a total of $31,619. The monthly resolution list for December 2019 total to the county $230,758.41.
All right, thank you. Can I get a motion to combine and approve? Let's go around. Mr. Miller, second. Mr. Payton. Any comments? It'll be a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Under the consent agenda, I'm removing 194. And is there anything else that needs to be pulled? Mr. Snipes?
I need to move 193 unless you want to make a correction to it, because it says Jackie Haas, but at the thing it says now therefore be resolved that Alice Tinker Parker. So we need to have, are we appointing Jackie or Tinker?
She's already on there. Tinker is.
No, what I'm saying is in your
It's a
right.
Scrivener's error, so I do appreciate you pointing that out.
So other than
yeah.
that, if we could correct that, I'm
Yeah,
fine.
that's fine. Is that noted on the Scrivener's error? And then we'll leave it on consent as long as that's noted?
Yeah, leave it on
Okay.
consent as long as that's
Okay.
noted.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any others? Yes, Ms. Weber?
Thank you. On the appointment, let's see, let me go back to the number. 197, it's just that there are two numbers, 9 and 8, on the resolution. It just doesn't look like the 9 has been, or the 9 has been crossed out. So just to confirm, the 9 is actually crossed out, and it is really 8 people, and there's a 2 and a 6 making 8. So it's fine, it just, there's the 9.
The 9 needs to be
I think it's in light.
taken care of. Okay.
It's fine.
Oh, so it's been lined out, it just wasn't deleted?
It just doesn't
Okay.
clear. It's
All
just
right.
not clear that it's lined out. On the copies we've had before, the 9 is lined out.
Okay, I don't see it in here real quick, but do we have that noted? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I think in the editing in the Word document, because for it to go into Unicode, things are struck and underlined, and I think it just didn't carry through.
Okay, all right.
It's, yeah.
It's noted, though.
It's
Yeah,
fine.
It is 8. The
It
number is 8.
it is 8.
Thank you for that. All righty, any other changes? All righty, so I guess I need a motion to approve the consent agenda. That would be Mr. Smith, a second for Ms. Polk. That'll be a roll call vote, please. I actually got to read it in the record. Yeah, record first.
The appointment of Matt Thifault to fill an unexpired term for the Moments Fire Protection District. The appointment of Jackie Haas to the ICANN Joint Education Commission. The appointment of Roger Blanchette to fill an unexpired term on the Exline Creek Drainage District. Reappointment of Leslie Burton to the Kankakee River Conservancy District. Ordinance amendment to County Code Section 10-1, Animal Control Personnel, Animal Control Subcommittee. Ordinance amendment to County Code Section 22-52A2, same, correction of violations, priority items.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. That'll be roll call, please.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mr. Tholen.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Byrne.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Peters.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Dunbar.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Zenz.
Aye.
Mr. Carrico.
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Ms. Zakulo.
Aye.
Mr. Featherling.
Aye.
Mr. Donnell.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Long.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Alrighty, under PZA, if we can get the title of the resolution read in for the first item.
ZBA case 19-13, text amendment to County Code Section 121-295, siting of wind energy conversion system.
Alrighty, you needed a motion to approve on that one first, Mr. Dunhill, second. Ms. Peters? Alrighty, do you want to do some explanation briefly, Del, on this one? All right.
Can you switch it over?
Let's try that. All right. We have currently there are two wind farm companies looking to establish new wind farms in Kankakee County. And over the past several months, they've been advising us of some different changes and trends in the industry, which are going to larger towers and fewer of them. So we brought it forward to the Zoning Board of Appeals to see if they would like to change the ordinance to allow for taller towers. And the Zoning Board of Appeals did agree that we should do that. So what we are doing is raising the height of towers from 499 to 699 feet. And associated with that is increasing setbacks for participating dwellings from 1,000 feet to 1.5, or excuse me, from 600 feet to either 1,000 feet or 1.5 times the tower height. And the minimum distance from non-participating dwellings to from 1,200 feet to either 1,200 feet or 2 times the tower height. Both Zoning Board and Planning and Zoning have recommended approval of this ordinance.
Is there any questions for Del on this one or anything else? Nothing? Alrighty, it says roll call, but that's a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Alrighty, ZBA 1906 in the record, please.
ZBA case 19-06, variances to section 121-394.4.A, C, D, and E billboard in the C2 General Commercial District 16, Bourbonnais Township.
Alrighty, is there a, see, do we have a motion on the floor here? It would be, I want to make sure of this here before I ask for the motion. Because this one was a motion to deny, I believe.
Yes.
This motion to deny, is that by Mr. Eckhoff and the second by Mr. Dunhill? Any discussion after we go ahead and go through the explanation?
All right. Mr. Jerry Fossert purchased the property located on the, as you can see on the map on the screen, that is on Arthur Birch Drive in Bourbonnais Township. And he wishes to install a digital billboard at that location. We went through several public hearings on this, and the proposal changed at every hearing. We originally started out with, excuse me, a 3-sided digital billboard, which In order to get that would have required 4 variances, as we only allow a 2-face sign. They wanted 40 foot tall instead of 30 feet tall. They wanted a 10-foot setback from the road instead of the required 40 feet, and a variance to allow more than 1 billboard in a 2,500 foot interval. Then on September 9th, their proposal changed again. This time they wanted 2 single-sided billboards, one at each end of the property, which would have only required 1 variance, which would have been the 2,500 feet between billboards. On November 4th, it changed again, and they went to 2 digital billboards on the north part of the property. This would have required a setback variance of, they wanted to be 13 feet from the road instead of the required 40, and still the variance to allow for the 2,500 foot interval. The map on the screen there shows that there are 5 billboards already within 2,500 feet of this location. So this would have just been adding to that situation there. So the Zoning Board of Appeals developed findings of fact, and I can go through every one of them if you'd like, but really the most important one, I think, and let me get it here so that I can read it for you.
Which number?
It's going to be on, give me just a second here. Sorry, I'm not feeling too well today. Is number 3. And that is that the board finds that the applicant is asking to relax codes that address safety, and those safety measures should not be taken away to appease the applicant's desires. So the zoning board unanimously voted, I believe it was unanimous,
Yeah, it was unanimous.
to recommend denial, and planning and zoning agreed with them.
Alrighty, questions, Mr. Snipes?
I noticed from the photography that there was standard billboards that they have, and this is a digital billboard, which is somewhat different in that it looks or appears as we go through the county that there are these new digital billboards placed up more, I guess, user-friendly, paper-saving, etc., environmental friendly, as you would say. It appears from the conversation that there was one that would have worked because it only required 1 variance. Did they consider and then tell the individual which would be the?
No, the proposal changed each time. The previous proposal was no longer considered.
Okay, so.
And as far as our ordinance is concerned, digital or non-digital doesn't make a difference in the commercial district.
Well, I'm not, the issue wasn't really
Okay.
to argue the digital or non-digital. I just know that's where it's kind of going. So he would be the first with a with a non-standard version with the digital. If they deny this, he has the opportunity to reapply with something that's within reason.
He always has that option.
Okay.
Yes.
And then what is the safety issue?
Being 10 feet from the road,
Yes.
the
Depends
sign
on
has the
30.
potential to fall across the road and therefore block the road. That Arthur Birch Drive is the only road in and out of that area.
Okay, and a standard one, if it fell across the road, would not do that.
Well, we have a maximum 30-foot sign with a 40-foot setback. So therefore, there is no possible way that if you follow the regulations, that the sign could fall across the road. There's a 10-foot buffer built into that.
Okay.
Any other questions? Alrighty, we have a motion to not approve. So there will be a voice vote. All those in favor of not approving, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. We have Mr. Byrne, who was a no. So motion carries. Alrighty, moving on. 19-14.
ZBA case 19-14, request for a special use permit 13C, single-family home in the R1 single-family residential district on a parcel generally situated in section 14 of Bourbonnais Township.
I guess on that one, is there a motion to approve would be in order on this one? We'll go with Mr. Featherling and Mr. Dunhill as the second. If we can get that one kind of described a little bit.
Mr. Olnick owns the property outlined in red on the screen and will be consolidating the two parcels into one 9.16 acre parcel. Our zoning ordinance requires that in the R1 district, to build a single family home on any parcel larger than 2 acres requires a special use permit. So he is asking for a special use permit to build one single family home on that property. The Zoning Board of Appeals agreed and recommends the approval, as does PZA.
Any questions for Del on this one? Alrighty, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Under finance, thanks Del, hope you feel better. Can we get the title of 202 read in the record, please?
Resolution of the County Board of Kankakee County regarding the tax year 2019 levy request.
Alrighty, starting off, we just need a motion to approve on that. Mr. Lear, second, Ms. Dunbar. Steve is here. We can get into questions if people have questions about the specific levy request or anything that is associated with that. Comments? Mr. Lear?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At Finance Committee, it was noted that the levy request gives I will call it an extra boost to the Veterans Affairs Commission. And this is an attempt to meet some of the needs that they have. They had been pulling down some of their reserves, and now we're trying to help them with those reserves. So I think this is something the full board should be aware of.
Yeah, that was it's some years ago when we were really in financial trouble. Well, it seems like that was a lot of years for a long, but they were draining their reserves, and now that we committed to upping the levy to get them more money going back their direction. So they're having a 14.5% increase, which is the largest on here. So, and we expect that to continue for the foreseeable future. To get them back where they need to be. Any other questions or comments? Alrighty, that'll be a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mr. Tholen.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Byrne.
Nay.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Peters.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Mrs. Dunbar.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Zenz.
Aye.
Mr. Carrico.
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Ms. Zakulo.
Aye.
Mr. Featherling.
Aye.
Mr. Dunhill.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Long.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. If we could move on to 203, please, and get that title read in the record.
Resolution of the County Board of Kankakee County, Illinois regarding amendments to the combined annual budget and appropriation for Kankakee County, Illinois, 2018-2019 fiscal year.
Already on this, motion to approve on this one here be Mr. Zenz, second. Ms. Parker. Alrighty, and Steve is here to answer any questions on this one as well. We've kind of gone through this at finance. This is typically what we do, is at the end of the year, we try to kind of acknowledge some things that may come in as far as higher revenues, which we had substantially higher revenues than we budgeted. And Steve, I don't know if you have any specific comments unless there's questions, but we try to level things off at the end of the year, basically. No questions, it's a roll call vote then.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mr. Tholen.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Byrne.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Peters.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Dunbar.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Zenz.
Aye.
Mr. Carrico.
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Aye.
Mr. Smith. Ms. Zakulo.
Aye.
Mr. Featherling.
Aye.
Mr. Dunhill. Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Long.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye, motion carries. Moving on to 204. We can get that rather long title read in the record.
Resolution of the County Board of Kankakee County, Illinois regarding authorizing the county board chairman or his designee to grant the authority to execute a 60-month of global positioning system monitoring agreement for a method of electronic surveillance.
Alrighty, need a motion to approve there, Mr. Hess. Second. Sorry, Mr. Kulo. Is there any explanation on this needed? If you have questions, go with you, Mr. Byrne, first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I asked this in criminal justice and finance, and again, I'll ask it again here. Is there a way we can invoice the parents of these juveniles that we are undertaking the cost for this service? Is that a possibility?
While I don't have the student loan payments for to be a lawyer,
Yeah.
I can say that I don't see how. I don't know if you have comment on that, but I don't see how the parents can be held accountable in that manner.
For their own children's behavior?
And I don't know if you have comment on that, but at this point, no, we do know that we have reached out to some of the municipal partners, and there is a willingness to look at curbing some of this cost going forward, especially when this is really needed for certain situations where the people that are on home detention are out in the community doing some things that need to be monitored. So, and you need GPS for that. So, yes, Mr. Snipes.
Yes, I had approved this. I believe this is the dealing with the ankle bracelets and the whole 9 yards. In its initial state, we have to have something that's going to deter or hopefully let the youth know there's a consequence for the actions, those that are abruptly shooting all over the place and doing whatever they're doing. This is why I went with this. If we were to try to send them to the juvenile detention center, that would be exorbitant costs compared to what this $8 or whatever the cost is for the bracelet. This bracelet, is it $8 or something a day?
That's a daily rate.
Yeah, a day.
Yeah.
So the cost benefit is definitely a savings, but at the same time, we have to have a tool in place. I hope at some point we can look in the for federal grants or something to kind of help us with this juvenile issue or whatever, but this is the reason why I approved it, and trust that the board will do so as well.
Any other questions? Ms. Dunbar?
Thank you, Chairman. There's just a Scrivener's error on the estimated cost. There's an extra 0 in there. On the resolution.
Oh, on the resolution itself? Okay.
It's 4,000.
It's a lot of zeros.
It is.
Noted. We'll get that fixed.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just messing with Nancy a little bit. It's been a Scrivener's meeting this meeting. We had some good ones. So any other questions about that? Mr. Carrico?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I do agree that this is important. I think that is important to have that in place so we can better monitor those individuals. However, I also have to agree that we should not be placing this burden on taxpayers for the fact that parents need to be accountable for whatever is happening with their own children, because if it was my children, I will be one to take care of that situation. So for that reason, if we cannot impose any kind of a fee for parents, then I will not be in favor of that. Thank you.
And as I thought about it a little bit too, I have to look it up, but I think Dillon's rule applies where we don't, the county boards aren't specifically given the authority to put fees on the courts. That all comes from the state, I believe. And we set levels of the fees that they're already established by the state. Like we can adjust what
I think we can look into whether or not we can start including it as a court fee. I mean, that's something we'd have to work with the judiciary on, and this is kind of like the first step to get going to try to do that. I mean, I know we can charge, probation fee or different fees in the court cost, which would, potentially go onto the parents. But that's something we'd have to explore, we'd have to look into to see how we would do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of in the, but know that we have to get moving on this pretty quickly because there is an impetus, as per Mr. Latham's comments in the past. So I do understand your point, yeah. Mr. Snipes, second time?
Yeah, I do understand his position. However, we also must understand that I know we put a lot of blame and things up on the parents, but a lot of these children are in foster homes, and a lot of these foster parents are doing what they possibly can. They can't take the liberties that you can as a parent to spank them or do anything. So as a result, these kids are running rapid and there's nothing to hold them accountable. So even though I understand that we have the traditional values in place, we're living in a society and a generation where those traditions are not as common. And one person has done all they could. We just spoke this weekend. What can you do? And I did state that we were passing this piece of this resolution to kind of move in that direction because the kids feel that they run away, they can't be found. At least with this, they can. So we have to we can't throw the bathwater out with the, with the soap, whatever you want to say. We do have to, at some point, take some initiative, and this is initiative in the right direction.
Gotcha. Any other comment? All right, we're spending money. That's got to be a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mr. Tholen.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Byrne.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Peters.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Dunbar.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger. Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Zenz.
Aye.
Mr. Carrico.
Nay.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Aye.
Mr. Smith. Ms. Zakulo.
Aye.
Mr. Featherling. Mr. Donnell. Mr. Miller. Mr. Long. Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to 205, please.
Resolution of the County Board of Kankakee County, Illinois regarding authorizing the Kankakee County Board Chairman or his designee to sign an agreement with Hitchcock Design Group for the purposes of releasing enterprise zone funds for Kankakee riverfront initiatives.
Is there a motion on this one? Mr. Featherling, second. Ms. Dunbar? Motion to approve, excuse me. I can give the brief explanation. Enterprise zone is comprised of all the mayors that are in the enterprise zone. They have an administrator, which is actually Ben Wilson is the county employee. It used to be Mike Van Mill. That the funds in that are held by the county, but they're not the county's money. The enterprise zone gets those funds from applications to enjoy the benefits of those businesses in the enterprise zone, tax benefits from the state. And the city of Kankakee came and asked for not to exceed $30,000 for some projects. The first project, they kind of changed midstream. You may have remembered this. This came before us in the past. They changed the actual projects, but not really the total dollar amount. So our auditor kicked it back to us and said, this, I can't sign off on this because you didn't authorize this amount of money, which it's not our money, but that's okay. It's basically a not to exceed number. That's what we approved from the enterprise zone. I'm a member of that board along with the other mayors. So we said not more than $30,000 in total. So this is allowing us to be able to take their money out of our accounts and give it to them for them to spend. Does that kind of shore up? Okay, so we don't have to keep coming back here nickel diamond every time they want to use part of that money. So any other questions or any questions on that? All righty, I guess that'll be a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mr. Tholen.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Byrne.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Peters.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Dunbar. Mr. Kinzinger. Mr. Fairfield. Mr. Zenz. Mr. Carrico.
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff. Mr. Smith. Ms. Zakulo. Mr. Featherling. Mr. Donnell. Mr. Miller. Mr. Long. Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Under 206, before he reads in the record, I'll just note that there's a Scrivener's error on the date. It should be today's date instead of September or November.
November.
Just want to mention that, so if we can get the title, please.
Resolution of the County Board of Kankakee County, Illinois regarding State's Attorney's Appellate Prosecutor Program fiscal year 2020.
On that one, need a motion to approve. Mr. Eckhoff, second. Mr. Snipes. Alrighty, any questions about this? This is something we do every year. Okay, well, for the public's sake, it's so we have access to attorneys from the appellate prosecutor's office instead of paying a lot of per hour rate for outside attorneys when we need them. This is a relatively low rate for any help that we may need. Usually it's labor negotiations and things like that. So it's only use it if, pay for it if you use it type stuff. So, oh, excuse me, this is a retainer, I believe. Yeah, it's a retainer, so we have access to that program instead of, $500 an hour to use an outside attorney. Okay, no more questions? Roll call vote.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Hess. Aye. Mr. Tholen.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Byrne.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Peters.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Dunbar.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Zenz.
Aye.
Mr. Carrico.
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Ms. Zakulo.
Aye.
Mr. Featherling.
Aye.
Mr. Donill.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Long.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to 207, please. We get that read in the record.
Resolution of the County Board of Kankakee County, Illinois regarding authorizing the Kankakee County Board Chairman or his designee to sign an agreement to contract with Bright Architecture for courthouse ADA improvements.
Alrighty, on that one, need a motion to approve first. Mr. Washington, second, Mr. Kinzinger. I will say that, just for some background on this, it's been probably, 10 years since the ADA thing started, way back when, roughly. Yeah, it's been a problem for a while, but when the Attorney General got a hold of us, it was about 10 years ago, I believe, and we finally have approval to do the last part of construction, which is an ADA courtroom and the ramp going into downstairs into the basement. We have preliminary drawings, which they approved. This is for the more detailed drawings that to actually get the work done. And we're going to talk about it in Building and Grounds next month, but we identified, we know the courtroom, and we now know when it's going to be done in April of next year. It's about a month construction for that courtroom and for the jury room and for the ramp going in. So this is the work for that. And Mr. Bright is also the county's architect. So this is outside of the scope of what he normally does, but he's been working on this the whole time. So I just wanted to get the background out there of where we're at. And we got a grant for this, I believe, 170? I believe it was about 163. We got $163,000 has to be spent by the end of June this next year. So that's why this timing is kind of critical, lining all this construction up. So it looks like we're all, blazing ahead on this, and we're going to be done with the immediate things the Attorney General wants to, but we still have to keep improving all of our buildings as we go along. So that's the background where we're at. So Mr. Lear first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Clearly, this is a vital project that we need to move forward on. Just a side note, this was not discussed in finance. It was, I believe, highway and the Buildings and Grounds Committee.
Yeah.
So finance committee members need to recognize this has been vetted by committee and is one that I would say we need to move forward on.
Yep. And just so, thank you for that. I appreciate the clarification. And then also to mention the Historical Preservation Commission is signed off on this as well. Because it does take a slight modification to the outside of the building. It's not major, it's just we have to shave a little corner off of the building to make a turn radius in case somebody that's uses a wheelchair can turn around and go back up the ramp. So it was either that or spend about another $700,000, believe it or not, to move the circle drive and everything down the hill. That would have been a mess. So Mr. Washington first, and then Mr. Snipes.
We have materials that's been taken out of the courthouse and kept in warehousing for reuse in the county, in the courthouse building.
I don't know that we have. I haven't asked that question directly. I can check. I asked if the stuff that was in Judge Albrecht's courtroom, the one that's going to be the ADA courtroom, had any historical significance. And by the laminate that was coming off of the benches, I could say no, that there isn't any in there. But she's going to get new carpeting, and she's really liking that too. But no, it's there's nothing in that room that has historical significance. But I didn't ask what you're asking specifically, so I can check on that and see if there's something in warehouse somewhere. You know,
I just think it's important to maintain the genuineness of the courthouse as much as we possibly can.
Right.
The changes.
Sure. Yeah, and I didn't think about that. I can't see where we would have, but I'll ask the question. I even asked them if they want to keep the 1974, chairs they have in there, the green. Oh, they're just lovely. Yeah, Art Deco's back, right? Yeah. So, yeah, they didn't laugh. Actually, they want them gone. So. All right. Any other questions about? Oh, Mr. Snipes, sorry.
You probably alluded to some of the things. I understand that we are taking an approach to meet the ADA requirements, but when we look at Bright Architect, I guess I'll save it for new business because I'm looking at some of the carpet and things that's in that courthouse that has not been changed in years and stains. When I was in the circuit clerk's office, that I'm thinking, can we change this carpet or put it back regular floors? But at another time. But I do think this is a step in the right direction. We're making it ADA compliant, but at the same time, I'm wondering if we can go a little further and just kind of look at what can we do to kind of liven up that courthouse healthy-wise,
Sorry? Okay. Did you want me to turn the mic on there, Mr. Seroy? No, I get you. And it would be nice at some point to go through and do all of that stuff. We're just not quite there yet. Yeah, we still got a couple years until we really don't have to, we don't have to borrow money this year, thank goodness, and hopefully that trend continues. But you're right, it is. There's the floors in there stained, and I mean, it was here. I mean, the chairs you're sitting in from the Brady Bunch, I believe, is where they got this from. I mean, these are, so again, we get it. We get it. Yeah. Yes. All right. Yes, sir.
I was going to say to you, Mr. Snipes, that Mr. Rowe is livening up that courthouse pretty well, so.
Disco ball, maybe, in the rotunda, yeah. All right, so moving on. We're having a good time about this, but this was a long haul. And there was a time we thought the Attorney General was going to file in court to take over our budget and force us to do the things that we knew we should have done. So about 3 years ago, we really started working on this. And this is the end of a long road of, first we fixed the minor stuff, then the more expensive stuff. Now we're into the really expensive stuff that turned into not being $1.5 million. We're getting it done a lot less expensive. And they worked with us, the Attorney General did. So I want to thank them for this. Any other questions? All righty, that'll be a roll call vote then.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Hess. Aye. Mr. Tholen.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Byrne.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Peters.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Dunbar.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger. Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Zenz.
Aye.
Mr. Carrico.
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Ms. Zakulo.
Aye.
Mr. Featherling.
Aye.
Mr. Donnell. Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Long.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Under Highways and Buildings, number 208, please.
Resolution of the County Board of Kankakee County, Illinois, resolution and ordinance for the establishment of an altered speed zone on 6,000 North Road traveling west from 2,000 East Road in Manteno Township Road District.
Is there a motion to approve here? It'd be Mrs. Peters, second, Mr. Zenz. Any questions there? It'll be a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. All righty. Under other business, I have an opening on Manteno number 9 drainage, one opening on X-Line Creek Drainage District, 2 openings on the Regional Planning Commission. I believe I've gotten one application. Nope, I actually got the application for the next one, the architect. So that'll be on executive. So we did find an architect who was interested. So under old business, is there any old business? Ms. Pope?
I need to ask a question. Is there any way, I wasn't here for the vote about concerning the marijuana, and I was wanting to know, is there any way that we could So I can put my 2 cents worth in and vote?
Ms. Polk called me about that a couple weeks ago, and I told her that she would have to say that under old business to see if the board wanted to allow her the opportunity to vote on that issue. The only way to do that would be, at first it was thought a motion to reconsider, but since we adjourned that meeting, it would have to be a motion to rescind, and then another vote would happen. So the question is that she's asking for the opportunity, and I guess it was due to a health issue, you told me. Instead of coming to the meeting, she went to the hospital. She was asking, I said, we have to ask the board, and that's your guys' decision whether you want to rescind that vote and vote again on this at another meeting, because that is part of it's parliamentary procedurally proper, if you will, to do so. It's just a matter if this board would so choose to do it. So it would take a motion and a second, and then a 3/4 vote to have that rescinding happen at this meeting. I'm trying to think of the right word. Rescission? I don't know if that's an actual word. I don't know what the word is. I just made something up. But anyway, or it would be at a future meeting, we could have the motion to rescind and then the revote right after that. So it's really at this board's discretion on how they want to handle it. I told her I would just usher the conversation and let you guys, obviously make a call.
If the motion is in order, I'll move that we rescind.
Second.
There is a motion and a second to rescind. Okay, because this is part of old business, so we can't do it. This is correct. So now we can go with questions from here. Hold on a second here. Who had their hand up for Mr. Featherling? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just give the opportunity to the other people who weren't here at that meeting also to vote.
Yeah, everybody can vote. It would be a complete revote. So if we vote to rescind, then it would go to the next full board meeting for the same resolution to be heard again. And then everybody that's there would have the chance to vote.
Okay.
That's the question, and that was Ms. Polk's request, so I told her I'd put it in front of the board. Mr. Snipes?
I think that, it's something that we have not, it's not a precedent that we have done with the board, whether individuals are here, and I do hear the exception to the rule. However, I'm apprehensive about going back and then re-deciding something and re-arguing something that we've already have approved in place. But I am, but there is an opportunity up under old business if that individual, if Ms. Polk wants to establish on the record why, if she's for or against the proposal of the unincorporated areas. But I do not think that we need to rehash and revisit something that we kind of argued before the public already. It's just my point.
Any other comment there on those lines? So the Mr. Washington?
I don't think that's useful because it doesn't give everybody an opportunity to vote on it again. If we're going to do it, we need to do it wholesale and have a complete revote.
And that's what this would allow. If you rescind that vote, then it goes back to the full board to vote again with everybody putting their vote in at that time. Right. That's all she was asking for, I believe. Yes, Ms. Kulo?
So when would the full board vote on that again? Would it be at the
It would be the next month, yeah. If we have 3/4 pass it here for the rescinding, then it would go to the full board next month. It wouldn't go back to committee, it would just go to full board. Mr. Hess?
Thank you, Chairman. And I understand Pat's, viewpoint on this, but what happens? Are we ready?
Yeah, sorry,
Okay.
she was giving me, it's 2/3, not 3/4,
right.
sorry, it's 2/3.
What happens if perhaps I don't make the next board meeting? Can I request the same thing? We're gonna keep continuing till this thing passes?
I guess, well, that's not my, I can't answer the
I'm
second part of
I'm
that.
just asking the question. It was voted down before.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with Mr. Snipes, which I very seldom do. But But if she wants to make her vote known and put it on a record, that's fine. But I cannot see going back, rescinding this, and then bringing it back to the full board again. We discussed it at the last month's meeting. It was voted on. It was defeated, and now we want to bring it back up again.
Any other, Ms. Cool? No? Okay, so again, the motion to rescind would be just so it's voted on again, and all those present will vote at the next meeting.
Clarify, is it, in order to rescind that, would it have to be the individuals that voted, they had the positive vote, or the controlling vote, or just anybody? I thought
anybody can on that one. On the motion to reconsider, if it's the same meeting, has to be the people on the prevailing side. But rescind, I printed out what I saw from Robert's rules. It can be anybody can make the motion to rescind.
That can rescind it or whatever, okay. And was this, just another point, was this also, this was discussed in committee, correct?
No.
Didn't we have a?
At PZA, it was discussed.
Yes, I'm talking about the marijuana, the whole 9 yards.
Right, yeah, and it passed committee. Okay. Yeah. So, okay, we all set on, get kind of what the vote is? The one motion that to approve would be, which is on the floor, would be to rescind, and if that happens by 2/3 majority vote, then there'd be a revote at the next full board meeting. Yes, sir.
So if I have a nay vote, that means that we do not want to rescind the previous decision.
Correct.
Thank you.
All righty, motion on the floor, and I guess it's a roll call vote.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Nay.
Mr. Tholen.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Nay.
Mr. Byrne.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Nay.
Mrs. Peters.
Nay.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Nay.
Ms. Dunbar.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Nay.
Mr. Fairfield.
Nay.
Mr. Zenz.
Nay.
Mr. Kiriko.
Nay.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Absolutely not.
Ms. Zakulo.
Aye.
Mr. Featherling.
Aye.
Mr. Donnell.
Nay.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Long.
Nay.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye.
Thirteen ayes. 12 nays. No.
So it's 13-12, but it does not achieve the 2/3, so it will not come back before the board. Okay? So then we move on. Is there any other?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
We pulled 94.
Yes.
We're not pulling it.
Yeah, we pulled it. Yeah.
2/3 without previous notice, a majority of entire membership.
The entire membership is 28 members.
So they need 15.
They would need 15.
Yeah. We said it needed to be 15.
To do the entire membership.
Right, yeah. Needed to be 15. Okay, so moving on. No more old business. Mr. Washington first.
I would like to apologize to the board. I was supposed to be here to do the prayer this morning, but both of my sons have been here for the weekend for the first time in a long, long time, and I enjoyed their company.
Good. No need to apologize. Tell Brandon I said hello. So if there's no more old business, under new business, we have a resolution. I guess we could read that in the title into the record, please.
Resolution appropriating funds for the payment of the county engineer's salary.
I need a motion to approve there. Mr. Washington, second, Mr. Snipes. Any questions on that? Mr. Lear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, just a minor point. This originally was on the agenda for finance, but we did not have all the information. Finance Committee gave a kind of head nod to go ahead and send this on to the board without any comment on it.
Okay. Yeah, it was not ready, so we could bring it here because it has to be done, so we just want to make sure, and I think we were waiting on the state to get the letter. I believe
Yeah.
that's the way that went, yeah. So it wasn't anything, Mark wasn't dragging his feet for a change. Ooh. All righty, we have a motion and a second. Okay, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mr. Tholen.
Aye.
Mrs. Pope.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Byrne. Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Peters.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Dunbar.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Zenz.
Aye.
Mr. Carrico.
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Ms. Akulo.
Aye.
Mr. Featherling.
Aye.
Mr. Donnell.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Long.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Any other new business? Mr. Snipes?
This is just a FYI. As you know, this is the 40th year for the Black History Program, and there's the ad books that's out. And I think they said the last one I thought I did come to the board, but wanted to let the board know that this year's the 40th year ad book for the Black History Program. As you know, this is a scholarship program that we basically have. It is well attended to the tune of about 2,500 or more that see the show. And on the Sunday show, it's packed out with about 1,300, 11, 12, whatever it is. And you see the wonderful kids. In the past 5 years, we've given out scholarships. This one Hispanic got it for $1,500. If they participate in the Black History Program, then they qualify for the scholarships. We want to give 4 because it's the 40th year. And so starting in January, after the New Year's, you'll probably see something coming to you. This is what it's coming for. What happened is at the end, you're getting a lot of individuals. If I have a cutoff date, I can't get it in. So to be fair, I'm saying it in December, and it's on record, so that no one says that I did not say. You can be Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, anything you want to be. If you want an ad in the Black History book, all you have to do, you'll get something from me, and then after that, let us know and get your stuff ready. And our printing people over here on Jeffrey will be able to get the AdCraft, I think it is. We'll get that for you, but we appreciate it. Again, we're looking to at least send 4 students away with 1,000, but if we get more, it will increase from that point. However, so thank you in advance for what you give and what you do, and that's my spiel. Thank you.
Any other new business, Ms. Polk?
Yes, I would like to say the prayer breakfast is coming up, Robert Snipes. And it's going to be January the 20th at the Quality Inn, so I'm going to be trying to get ads and tickets for the prayer breakfast to anybody that would like to go.
Okay.
And also, I would like to say this. If anybody knows a rabbi, because it's an interfaith breakfast, I would like to have a rabbi at the breakfast.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All righty. Well, any more new business? Mr. Hess?
I'm going to make a motion to adjourn, but before I do, I'd like to ask we keep fellow board member and friend Mike Legess in our prayers. He's not doing very well, so. And I'd make a motion to adjourn.
A second from Ms. Dunbar, and I would agree with you, Mr. Hess. We need to keep Mike in our thoughts and our prayers. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Have a good day.